History's most bizarre royal deaths, where crowns fell by poison, fire, laughter, and secrets buried with them. Forget majestic farewells and noble last breaths. Some royals left this world in ways so bizarre, gruesome, or just plain absurd they belong in the darkest corners of history books. These aren't fairy tale endings. These are the strangest royal deaths ever recorded, and they're going to blow your mind. King Adolf Frederick of Sweden. In 1771, King Adolf Frederick of Sweden sat down to his final meal and made it a royal event. On the table, lobster, sauerkraut, smoked herring, caviar, and 14 helpings of his favorite dessert, semla, soaked in hot milk. His appetite was legendary, but this time, it was lethal. Hours later, his stomach turned into a war zone. The king collapsed, writhing in agony. Official cause of death? Simply overeating. He quite literally ate himself to death on a holiday meant for indulgence. His death became a dark national joke, the king who died of dessert. But behind the absurdity was a lesson about excess and ego. He'd been a weak monarch, often mocked, and his final act mirrored his rule: overindulgent, reckless, and ultimately pointless. His passing even sparked political unrest in Sweden. A king's death should unite a nation, but his became a cautionary tale, not of bravery or conquest, but of cream buns, bloated pride, and a throne that couldn't stomach the truth. King Charles II of Navarre. Nicknamed Charles the Bad, this 14th century king lived up to his title. Poisonings, betrayals, and backstabbing defined his reign. But it's his exit that truly shocked history. Sick with illness, his doctors soaked linen in brandy and wrapped his body as a medieval remedy. Then came the fatal mistake. A servant brought in a candle. In a flash, the alcohol-soaked cloth ignited. The king burst into flames, screaming as he burned alive in his own bed. His enemies said it was divine justice, the cruel king reduced to ash. His scorched remains were buried quietly, with no ceremony, no national mourning. Centuries later, his name still conjures nightmares of tyranny and fire. Some even whispered the servant was sent by fate itself. Whether medical blunder or poetic punishment, one thing was certain: he ruled with fear, and he died in terror. The flames that consumed him seemed to echo his brutal legacy. King Martin of Aragon. It was 1410. King Martin of Aragon was bloated from indigestion and bedridden. To lighten the mood, he summoned his jester. The joke? A story about a deer that escaped by hanging from its own testicles. Crude, but apparently hilarious. Martin laughed uncontrollably, so hard he stopped breathing. Minutes later, he was dead. Some say it was a ruptured artery. Others call it poetic absurdity. But this king, known for his temper, met his end with an explosive laugh. His advisors were stunned. One moment, their king was wheezing with laughter. The next, lifeless. But what came after was worse. Martin died without naming an heir, triggering a major succession crisis. His laugh might have ended his life, but it also tore apart a kingdom. His death marked the end of his dynasty. History rarely remembers him for his rule. It remembers him for a joke too funny to survive. Irony, it seems, has a dark sense of humor. Sigurd the Mighty. Sigurd the Mighty, a 9th century Viking earl, thought he'd won a glorious battle. To prove it, he tied the severed head of his slain enemy to his saddle. But as he rode triumphantly, the dead man had the last laugh. His teeth scraped Sigurd's leg repeatedly during the journey. A scratch turned to infection. Days later, Sigurd was dead from a corpse bite. Not by sword, not by arrow, but by the rotting mouth of a dead man. Viking legends praised Sigurd's bravery and brutality, but none could ignore the sheer absurdity of his end. Superstitious Norsemen believed it was a curse, the dead reclaiming vengeance. His men, once proud, now whispered his name in fear, not honor. Even today, historians are baffled. How could such a fearsome warrior fall to a corpse's teeth? It's a brutal reminder, no matter how powerful you are in life, death always bites back. Emperor Valerian of Rome. In 260 AD, Roman Emperor Valerian marched into Persia and lost everything. Captured by King Shapur I, Valerian wasn't executed immediately. He was kept alive as a living humiliation. For years, Shapur used him as a footstool to mount his horse. The once mighty Emperor of Rome, reduced to kneeling under another's boots every single day. His soldiers could only watch from afar. His name, once powerful, now dragged through dust and mockery. Eventually, Shapur had Valerian flayed alive. His skin was dyed, stuffed, and displayed in a temporary human relic of Persian dominance. Rome never recovered its pride after that. Valerian became the first and only Roman emperor to die in captivity, and perhaps the most dishonored. His death wasn't just execution, it was symbolic destruction, a message that even the greatest can be degraded into trophies. His legacy lives on not in marble, but in shredded skin and shame. King George II of Britain. It was a quiet October morning in 1760. King George II, aged and stiff, finished breakfast and headed to his private bathroom. But moments later, a crash. Servants rushed in to find the king collapsed beside his chamber pot. He'd suffered a massive heart aneurysm. Yes, the King of Great Britain died on the toilet, a fate so awkward, even his courtiers avoided mentioning the location for years. George's reign was marked by war and political shifts, but his death was quiet, sudden, and absurdly human. Newspapers of the time wrote only that he died suddenly, refusing to mention the throne of porcelain. It was an ironic end for a monarch who demanded control, but couldn't even choose where he'd breathe his last. His funeral was grand, but behind the pageantry, whispers of his bathroom demise never died. King Alexander of Greece. In 1920, King Alexander of Greece strolled through his garden, unaware that death was hiding in the branches. When his dog began fighting a pet monkey, Alexander rushed in, but a second monkey lunged and bit his leg. A minor wound, it seemed, until infection set in. Doctors debated amputation for days, unsure what to do. In 3 weeks, the king was dead from a monkey bite. The throne was thrown into chaos. Alexander's death seemed like a personal tragedy until it triggered a national disaster. With no heir, political instability exploded. Within months, Greece was at war again, all because of a monkey bite. The British Prime Minister called it a monkey's bite that cost 1 million lives. It sounds unreal, but it's true. Sometimes history turns not on battles or treaties, but on the teeth of a monkey no one remembered. Crown Prince Sedo of Korea. In 1762, Crown Prince Sedo suffered from violent mood swings, possibly schizophrenia. His father, King Yongjo, saw him as unstable and dangerous, yet royal blood made execution unthinkable. So the king issued a cruel compromise: lock Sedo in a wooden rice chest. For 8 summer days, the prince sat in total darkness, baking in heat, begging for water, food, mercy. None came. On day 9, silence. Sedo's death shocked the nation, but it was hidden for decades. Even his name was erased from palace records. Only later did his son, who became king, reveal the truth. The story became Korea's royal tragedy, sparking debates about mental health, royal cruelty, and power gone cold. The image of a prince suffocating inside a box, forgotten by all, is one that still haunts Korean history. Not all executions use swords. Some use silence. King Edmund Ironside. In 1016, King Edmund Ironside fought fiercely against Danish invaders, but after a brief peace, he died suddenly on the toilet. Legend says an assassin hid beneath the seat and stabbed him upward with a blade. The royal bowel turned into a trap. Whether it's true or myth, no one knows. But in Anglo-Saxon lore, his death became a warning. Even kings shouldn't sit too comfortably. Edmund's death ended Saxon resistance in England and helped the Danes take full control. His body was buried in haste. Some claimed he was poisoned. Others insisted the toilet tale was true. But what sticks in history is the imagery. A warrior king, undone not on the battlefield, but in his bathroom. The fall of a dynasty began not with a sword, but with a seat. A royal flush indeed. Empress Elizabeth of Austria. Empress Elizabeth, known across Europe as Sisi, was more than just royalty. She was a rebel spirit trapped in a golden cage, famous for her beauty, obsessions, and fierce independence. But her death in 1898 was as strange as her life was tragic. In Geneva, she was approached by an anarchist posing as a well-wisher. He lunged with a needle file so thin and sharp, Sisi barely noticed. She continued walking for minutes, unaware that her heart had been pierced. Only when she collapsed did the truth unfold. There was no scream, no panic, just a quiet fall of a woman who had outrun fate for decades, until it caught up with a whisper. Doctors didn't find the wound at first. It was too delicate, like a pinprick on porcelain. But inside, her heart was bleeding out. By the time they realized, it was too late. Empress Elizabeth died quietly, in a small lakeside hotel, not in a palace, not on a throne. A global icon, undone by a sliver of steel and a flick of chance. Her assassination stunned the world, not just for its method, but for its eerily poetic timing. A life of mystery ended in silence.